Today marks 40 days that I've had the a6700, and I wanted to check in with you guys and let you know my user experience, how I've enjoyed it. This isn't the a6700. My gosh. Today marks day number 40 that I've had the a6700, and I wanted to check in with you guys and let you know my experience. I've used this camera on portraits, product shots. I went to the aquarium, outdoors, as a vlog camera, for landscapes, insects, wildlife, tame life, as a macro camera, and just an all-around camera that I've used for everyday type of shooting. Things that don't require a full-frame camera like my a7S III or an action camera, just the overall value that you get with the 6700. I've already versed the a6700 versus the a7C versus the a7C2 versus the a7CR and the a6600, and I've become very familiar with how this camera operates, its limitations, and some of its benefits. And I can tell you that its popularity is a real thing, not a marketing ploy by Sony, because it is such a good camera. I have been seeing people are concerned about the overheating out of the a6700, and I've never had it overheat on me, but I know it's a concern, and I went out and tested both 4K 60 and 4K 24 to see what kind of overheating results that I would get. I did update the 6700 to the new firmware, and the overheating tests that I was getting before and after are a little bit concerning. I'll explain more later in the video. But just like the Fuji XS20, these cameras are a lot smaller. They do not have internal fans, and they're gonna overheat, especially if you shoot for a long period of time in 4K 60. I never happened to shoot in 4K 60 for a very long period of time, and that's probably why it never overheated on me. But if you're going to shoot for anything longer than, say, 30 minutes in 4K 60 or above, then I would pick up the FX30, which has an internal fan, which the a6700 does not, or the Fuji XS20. You can always pick up one of those little fans that Ulanzi makes that you put right on the back of your camera right here. I'm not so sure how the audio would leak into the native microphone of this camera or how much bulkier that would make your camera, but it is an option in case you want the 6700 and you want to shoot anything over 30 minutes in 4K 60. Now, if you want to shoot in 4K 120, then it probably will overheat on you. When I used this camera for all of the stuff that I used it for, I shot it in 4K 60 and 420 10-bit, so I didn't use that 422 10-bit. I just cranked it back a little bit, and that was like the perfect sweet spot to where I'm not going to lose so much image quality. It was also a lot easier to edit on my Mac 420 10-bit rather than trying to edit that 422 10-bit. So if you want to pick up the 6700 but you're a little bit concerned about the overheating, if you're using it for all the stuff that I used it for, then you won't have a problem. My favorite thing about the 6700 is not only the price, but the body weight and the size of it. It's just super portable and easy all around, fun camera to have, and the fact that you can shoot in 422 10-bit. I recently did a commercial video where I brought my a7S III and the 6700, and I ended up using the 6700 for probably 80% of my shots just because it was a lot easier. The image was so clean, and even though it won't perform as good in low light as a full frame camera, I was still really impressed with its low light performance. If I could have had a camera that was this good back in the day when I first started, man, my life would have been so much easier, and my production value would have skyrocketed a lot faster than having to just go up through the ranks, starting with an Osmo Pocket, actually starting with a smartphone, then going to an Osmo Pocket, finally being able to save up for an a7 III, which can't even shoot in 4K 60. So anybody who's coming into this space right now who can pick up the 6700 with a couple APS-C lenses is going to be way better off than I was when I first started. When you throw APS-C lenses onto the 6700, like this Sigma 30mm f1.4 or this Viltrox 13mm f1.4, the whole setup is so minimalistic. You don't even need a huge camera bag to go wherever you're going to shoot. You can literally just pack a couple lenses and maybe like a side bag and a tripod or maybe even a gimbal, and you're still gonna have such a minimalistic setup with an unbelievable image quality. Something that's very similar to what you would go out and shoot with a full frame camera, like my a7S III or the a7CR or the a7C2. I got a lot of comments from you guys saying that you couldn't even really tell a big image quality difference between these two cameras, and I found that to be the case as well. Even when I threw it onto my big screens, I was looking at the image detail very close, and as long as I didn't scale in very far, and you really can't tell a difference between a full frame $5,000 setup to this sub $2,000 setup, a6700 paired with different APS-C lenses. In fact, if I was to just get one full frame lens on my full frame camera, that's in most cases the equivalent of getting 3 to 4 APS-C lenses for your APS-C cameras. So it's something to think about and why the a6700 to me is so valuable. Also, another thing to think about, if you're going into the professional realm or the client work side of things and you get an APS-C camera with some APS-C lenses, your overhead won't be as high, so you can charge less, which means you'll be more competitive in your pricing. If you're just a hobbyist, you could get the a6700 with a Sigma 18 to 50 millimeter f2.8 and still be under $2,000. The photography is also an amazing thing with this 26 megapixel sensor. Because it has that 1.5 times crop, you get to punch in a little bit closer than what you would get with the full frame cameras and still have a tack sharp image. It's because of that reason I believe this camera is such a great value proposition for anybody who wants to start creating videos. But one thing that's more valuable than this camera is time, and that brings us to today's sponsor, which is TimeBolt. Let me show you what I mean. First of all, I was a user of TimeBolt before we even started this collaboration, so this sponsorship is very organic. TimeBolt has single-handedly saved me so much time in my editing process, and when you put out as much creative content as I try to do, then you try to come up with ways to make your workflow more efficient. Check this out. You drag your headshot into TimeBolt and it automatically removes all of the silent parts between your sentences, so you could literally go through your entire timeline and start popping in B-roll. And if that's not enough, TimeBolt has its own editor that can add chapters embedded into the videos. So the videos that you upload to YouTube will automatically be pre-timestamped. There are so many shortcuts that you can use that Final Cut Pro doesn't even offer. But if you do still use Final Cut Pro, you can export FCP XML files right into Final Cut Pro, which are still fully editable clips, so you don't have to rely on anything being baked in. And I keep on getting astonished how TimeBolt keeps on coming out with unprecedented updates. You guys gotta check them out. All right, so if you're ready to start editing faster, then I'm gonna leave a 20% discount link in the description. I promise you, you will thank me later. Now let's get back to our video. I mainly shoot video, but I have to tell you, I've been getting into photography a lot more with this camera, just in the fact that no matter what lens setup you have, you get that extra 1.5 times reach, equivalent to what you would get if I had a full frame lens on here. And I'm just shocked at how clean and sharp my images are. So if you do weddings, then I would say this would be your B cam to get a lot of the photos outside. And then when it's time to come inside, then you would switch over to say your A7C2 or a full frame setup to get some of those low light shots. Sorry, not to harp on these APS-C lenses, but I picked up this 55 to 210 Sony APS-C telephoto lens for I think just under $100 used on Amazon. And when I put it onto this a6700, it becomes a wildlife setup that I could have only dreamed about getting 3 years ago. But that's just a testament to how cheap APS-C lenses are, especially when you pair it with such a great camera like the 6700. At this point in my journey, I would use the 6700 as a B cam on a professional client shoot. I'm not so sure I would use it as my A cam because of the overheating factor and also the fact that it only has one card slot. But when I started out, I would have definitely used this as my A cam. If anything would have been better than my smartphone or the Osmo Pocket. I would have had no issues with it at all. But as for now, I would say it would be a good B cam for me. And this is coming from someone who has actually used the ZV-1 as my B cam and the ZV-E10 as my B cam in client shoots in the past, and I've never had any issues with cards being corrupt, overheating, or batteries running out. But that is another benefit to this small form factor camera. Unlike the ZV-E10, it has the NPV-Z100 batteries, or whatever these things are called, a lot bigger than what you would get with the ZV-E10. And this battery will last me about 2 hours when I'm kind of shooting in bursts in 4K 60 and intermixing some photography into there. The 2.36 million dot EVF that comes on the a6700 also comes in clutch, especially if you're shooting in sunny environments or you like to shoot macro photography or videography. I like to use the display and just turn on focus peaking, turn it to red and turn it to high. That way I can see and make sure that the edges are 100% sharp. But when I'm outside and it's bright, then sometimes the only thing that I can do is use the EVF. If I'm inside, I like to use the EVF, but that is just another benefit to this camera, that it has an EVF that's really good in my opinion. It's not the best in the world, but it's good enough to get the job done. The buttons and the dials are also an update from previous version cameras, and I'm not just talking about the layout or what they look like, but you can actually feel the difference. They're a little bit more firm, they're a little more stiff. The display is even a little bit more stiff than what you would get with like the ZV-E10 or other APS-C cameras on the market. Like this Fuji XS20, where the display just kind of seems plasticky and doesn't feel as firm as what you would get with the 6700. And those things are important because that will mean it's going to last longer. Some of my other cameras that I've had over some years are so loose that you could almost just touch it and it would flop open like this. Now maybe over time it'll get more loose, but at least in the beginning here it feels good, and the dials and buttons are a little bit more stiff. I like to make sure when I touch a button I know what I'm touching and I don't accidentally turn the aperture up without even knowing that I did it. The ergonomics of this camera is so much better than a full frame setup, especially if you're a traveler. I also like how the on and off switch is very easy to turn on and off, and I don't think I would ever accidentally turn it on or off. Just the customization of this camera is so nice. The fact that you can pretty much turn any button or dial the way that you want it. I turned the C1 button right here to a secondary record button because I find it a lot easier to just be able to press it with my thumb and record rather than trying to search up here with my forefinger, or if the camera is facing towards me like this and there's a key light in my face and I'm filming like a YouTube video like this, it's really hard to figure out where that record button is, but I can just take my thumb like that and press and I'm good to go. So I love the customization of this camera as well. I don't like how on other cameras that I've had in the past, there's mode buttons that you kind of have to use the display and turn it to go from photo to video to S&Q, whereas the a6700 has a toggle here, and man, I can't tell you how nice that's been when I've been switching between photos and videos, and just being able to look down and see, okay, I'm in video mode, I want to switch over to photography, where sometimes like other cameras, I don't know what mode I'm in and I kind of have to go through that mode button to figure out am I in photo or video. So just being able to see it, to feel it, and to move it with my finger is super helpful and beneficial. As you probably know, the autofocus capabilities out of this camera are truly remarkable. You can focus on humans, birds, animals, airplanes, and I've used it for all of those things. Well, I haven't done airplanes yet, but I've done it on insects. And one cool thing too about the 6700 is you can get really intricate when you're focusing on a human, whether you want it to be the left eye or the right eye, and you can set up a face memory. So if you're filming a wedding and you want to make sure that the bride stays in focus and everybody around her doesn't get into focus and you don't have a bunch of focus pumping because it's trying to focus on all these different faces, you can do that as well. You can also use focus mapping for added focus assistance. Coincidentally, the more I go down this journey of video creation and filmmaking, the less I use autofocus and the more I use manual focus. I will use autofocus to focus in on the subject that I want it to focus on, but then I'll just switch it over to manual focus because I'm kind of paranoid that I'll still get some focus pumping even though we're dealing with autofocus that is just state of the art. If you're a vlogger or someone who likes to do presentations in front of a camera, then the auto reframing function is a great little feature to have. I've never used it in real world situations, but I have tested it and it works out pretty good. I wouldn't go to the medium crop or even the close-up crop. I would probably keep it back a little bit because even medium crop is a little bit too close to my face for my liking, but you can use it for whatever you want and it makes it look like someone is filming you. And because of the AI processing chip that you get 5.5 stops of stabilization, which means it's going to be pretty stable while you're walking and vlogging with the camera. Another thing that it has is internal time lapse. So from cameras in the past like the A7S III, the FX30, the A7 III, the ZV-E10, the ZV-1, you had to go through interval shooting mode, and all that would do is just take a bunch of pictures and then you would have to seam them together in post and then export a video file, whereas this camera will do internal time lapse, so you can set your camera up, set it, forget it, and when you come back and you export that, it'll export as an actual video clip in S-Log3 that you can color grade in post-production. As for the firmware update and the overheating issue, even though I wasn't having any overheating, I thought maybe I'll just get that firmware update. I think it's 1.01 just because I want to be safe and I don't want it to overheat on me after I've made all these videos and said it's never overheated on me. Before I updated that firmware, I think it was 1.01, I was getting 37 minutes in 4K 60 and that was 420 10-bit. And after I updated, I ended up getting 28 minutes and 420 10-bit 4K 60. So I would say if you didn't update yet, then don't do it. And if you know how I can revert it back to the old version, please let me know because that's what I would want to do. Even though, again, I'm not really too concerned about it. I don't think it's going to overheat on me because that's not what I use it for. I never shoot longer than 20-second clips in 4K 60. 4K 24, I had no problem. I think I went to 1 hour and 40 minutes and it didn't overheat on me at all. And in fact, the battery exhausted at that point. So 4K 24, no problems, no concerns there. But the 4K 60, I would say don't update to the version 1.01, wait for 1.02 to come out. So that's my review of the 6700, the form factor, the body size and weight, the price, just everything about it is just such a great value proposition for anybody who wants to get into video, or even someone who's in video already and they want a B cam or a C cam. Let me know if you have any questions about this camera before you go out and purchase one of your own. And until then, just let me know what you'd like me to shoot with this thing. Cinematic footage, what cameras do you want me to verse it against? Just give me some video ideas because I'm running out. All right, I'm Joe with the Film Alliance. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, have a nice week.